Hello, everyone. We're at the Apidays Interface Day 2. I hope you had a great day one as much as we had. We talked about a lot of topics, API platforms, API ecosystem, API strategy, and actually how to match your APIs with your strategy. That was mainly the main topic. On the tech side, we talked about the new API tech stack, the new standard protocols, technologies, type of gateways, whatever protocols that currently at the state of the art of the space. And yes, we try also to have roundtables and workshops, hands-on workshop to discover what are the latest features and product that will enable you to do it at next Monday with your team. So let's embrace this API economy and also APIs for the next 10 years. Just a quick sum up about what we will do and also what is Apidays for people who did not attend day one. So Apidays is really the conference to connect the humans behind APIs. We're celebrating our 10 years anniversary. And for the last 10 years, we're just trying to connect the humanity behind APIs. Because of COVID, we've did it remotely the last 2 years, but we're back in person at the end of the year for our main events. So we do events in many places of the world, from USA, Europe, Middle East, APAC. But you are at Interface, our main online event where we are able to have speakers that are really hard to get in real time, but at least they can be there because of this remote ability. So Apidays, after the first 9 years, we were able to have like 75 events, 70,000 past attendees for more than 300,000 developers, architects, integration managers, IT managers, and also platform owners, platform managers to talk about the API mindset. So we're really glad to have powered this community over the last 10 years. If you want to know more about the events, the hashtag of the event is Apidays Interface. I know people tweet less when it's just online because they can't take photos with each other, but at least if you want to make some noise about the event, you can tweet at Apidays Interface for the hashtag, and you can mention us at Apidays Global. We will be glad to retweet you to our community. Apidays is just we do events, but we don't only do events, we do consulting, we help company hire. The only thing that can scale is hiring. We do also deep research about the space. We help company organize classes and training, and we help also the industry with knowledge, with content, newsletters, blogging, and social media. 3 initiatives I really want to talk about that are extremely important. The Women in API initiative. It's a network of hundreds of potential speakers who identify as a female that are sometimes first-time speakers or that want to be coached to be comfortable to go on stage. Again, we know in this community, in the tech community, we don't have enough gender diversity representation. So we fight for that in our Women in API program. It's a program to help people be seen and heard, to foster diversity and talent in API community. And again, we have a lot of members, 200 members, and we have quarterly meetups. We have people who are coached, and we really want to thank Stoplight and Twilio to support this initiative. So if you know a female, or if you're identified as a female and you want to be coached and trained for your first talk, or maybe to improve your skills, to be accepted at more conferences, don't hesitate to join that program. The second thing we do is the Sustainable Digital Challenge. It's a 3-month program to actually rethink your whole stack according to eco-design principles on the UX, on the code, on the architecture, and the hardware. So it's we've done our 3rd edition. We started 3 years ago, and so again, every time dozens of large corporations comes and rethink the whole application stack, APIs and databases according to eco-design principles. And the 3rd initiative I really want to talk about is APIscene, our media platform, community-driven media platform on APIs, just API news on the tech side, on the business side. So if you sometimes you can't listen a 25-minute talk, but you can read a 3 to 5 minute version of what speaker have produced directly on the platform. Today, what we have after the keynote, we'll have, again, as yesterday, a business track, a tech track, and roundtable and workshop. So you will be able to go where you want. And we just want to thank our platinum sponsor for this event, IBM. You can go on their booth, of course, to know about their leader API management solution. And also our gold sponsors like Web Security, WSO2, and Red Hat. So Web Security is an API security solution. WSO2 and Red Hat are two also leader open source API management solutions that you can visit their booth to any event. We also thank our silver and bronze sponsor who helped this to make this event happen and enable to do it at scale. But now we're really glad to have on stage someone who has been a pioneer, who has been maybe the first main entrepreneur to say APIs will be a big thing. We need company, we need the tools, we need an ecosystem to make it happen. So it's Chet Kapoor. Hello, Chet. How are you doing today?
Hello, Beatty. Thank you very much for having me here. Doing great.
Yeah, again, it's an honor to have you. You're extremely busy, but because of this remote ability with online conferences, we can have some of your time. Thank you very much for being there with us. I invite you to share your slide and enjoy 20 minutes with us on the virtual stage. Thank you very much, Chet.
Thank you, Mehdi. Folks, thank you very much for the opportunity to spend some time with you and talk to you about APIs the next 10 years. For those of you in the audience that see Next spelled differently, it's because you'll see in a moment, I started my career at a company called Next that was between Steve Jobs, Apple to Next to Apple. And so I cannot help myself but spell it that way. I was trying to get creative on the title, and I decided that the best title was the title of the conference itself. And so let's get going on this. Let me start by just a 10-second thing. I had a chance to work at Next. Did a company called Active Software. Some of you may not remember it, but it was one of the pioneers of what we fondly call enterprise application integration, having helped create an industry there. Did a company called BEA, and then open source company that was acquired by IBM. Joined Apigee in the very early days, pre-product, pre-revenue, and that's where we actually created the API management industry. Had a chance to take it public. Google Cloud acquired it, and it was a Google Cloud for 2 years. Transitioned it over, did some things in the education space at Google, and then about 2.5 years ago joined DataStax. So it's been an exciting ride. Across everything I've done, I've always been in the what I call septic tank cleaning space, in the infrastructure space, primarily in the middleware space, but now very deeply in the data side. So I'm going to, the way I've segmented the presentation is I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, the history of APIs. And this is just more a personal thing myself. Recently, with everything going on in the world, with wars, with pandemics and things like that, this is one of the best ways to get through this is to actually think about how people dealt with all these different things in the past. And so I've been spending a lot of time just reading what's happened over the last 1,000 years. And I thought it might help the audience to actually give you a perspective on the making of the API industry itself and how we saw it. Right, we were not just in the front seat; we were actually driving the car. Right, and so I'll walk through that. I'll talk a little bit about the future of APIs, and then I can't help myself but actually talk a little bit about data and how APIs and data come together. So again, thanks very much for the opportunity. Let's get started. So I thought this was appropriate on the history part on Confucius, right? Study the past if you want to define the future, and that it just the words he uses is so specific. Right, it won't define the future, but if you would define the future, and I thought this was very appropriate, and I wanted to start my presentation with this quote. So let's talk about the making of the API industry. A long time ago, hopefully, some of you remember some of this. When we were hanging around, sitting around a conference room, talking about where the world was going, we got inspiration from a lot of people in the industry. And I would love to sit down here and say, stand here and say, hey, we thought about this and came up with it, but we got a lot of inspiration and a lot of help. So the first one was the Google Maps API, right? It came out, I don't remember the exact dates, but it was long before the API management space came about. And we were just floored on how beautiful it was and how they took the maps world and said it needs to be available through an API. and we were just floored by what they did. And so we were like, wow, that's interesting. And this is while, turn by turn directions were coming out and things like that. So super interesting. That was very helpful. The one that really got us going into the API space was actually the Twitter API. For those of you that may not remember, because we're thinking about, Twitter, Elon Musk, things like that. But a long time ago, Twitter was just an API. They didn't actually have an interface at all. There was no mobile app. There was no web app. In fact, there was an entire industry of apps that you could get that actually all plugged into the Twitter API feed. And you went out and tweeted from those different apps with different experiences. There were an entire cottage industry around it. And we really wanted to do something with Twitter. And since there were a lot of people developing apps around Twitter, we said the best thing to do was actually start with a Twitter API console. We spent a lot of time with Twitter, came up with a console, and people actually loved it. And I'm dating myself, but this is 2008, 2009, right? They got super excited, and that was, by the way, the beginning of what called Apigee and how it got started. The thing that helped us quite a bit was, and I wanted to say that this is the web services, the Amazon Web Services mandate, and I specifically wanted to say it because for those of you who are students of history, you should go back and look at Jeff Bezos' quote. Basically said, all inter-process communication will happen through services, and people who don't do it through web services will not work at Amazon. And that, by the way, was the beginning of what Andy Jassy went off and actually started with doing with AWS. And that actually fundamentally changed how they built. And now, obviously, they were not doing RESTful stuff. They were doing SOAP in the beginning. But that actually changed how people communicated internally to build very complex systems. And we thought that was very intriguing to us. After the Twitter API, the next big thing that happened that actually really, really helped us was the introduction of the iPhone. And we thought this was actually phenomenal because the way you do APIs, we were like, let's go to every iPhone meetup and let's go off and actually talk about APIs. And we actually did that and no one listened to us. It was really interesting because you didn't need an API for Angry Birds because, the app actually was just sitting on the phone. There was no cloud service that they were accessing. So we were a little early to the market. But what happened after that was that the second generation of iPhone apps started actually putting stuff in the cloud, and they would, have the app on the phone. And that's when APIs really came into play. And so please don't underestimate how much mobile actually drove the API space, right? Twitter was our inspiration, but mobile is what drove it. And what mobile led to was this beautiful thing called digital transformation, right? Because the web native companies went off and actually built their generation 1 and generation 2 apps. But what a lot of the existing companies realized was they actually had to go off and transform their businesses. They started by talking about mobile being an adjunct, just like they did with web commerce, and very soon realized that the app was the center of how people wanted to interact with them. So we attached ourselves first to mobile, then obviously to digital transformation. And that's when it started becoming something a lot of people paid a lot of attention to. And then we started thinking a lot about platform business models because of our experience with Twitter, looking at how Maps was doing things and lots of really good examples. And so we started spending some time with people like Marshall. I know he was here, had a keynote yesterday. And so we started thinking about how you get network effects with APIs, because it's not about the APIs you use internally. It's not just the ones that you actually use with your B2B partners. It's not the ones you use to actually fuel your B2C, but it's also about what you do from a business to a developer outside, right? And actually have an open API that people can do different things with. So all those things, that is how the API management space came about. So it was super interesting. And along the way, we had a lot of help, right? There was a small company called Netflix in 2009 that said they would work with a little company called Apigee. There was a company called MTV that said, we really like your stuff, but we only want it in the cloud. We started using AWS in 2009 as well. And then a company called AT&T came about and said, you're a $250,000 company, and we're going to write you a $10 million check because APIs are how we are going to change our business. But one of the most intriguing examples was Walgreens, because Walgreens had a photo sharing API, and they actually after they built their photo sharing API with actually made it available to different people in different kinds of apps, where you could actually go to all these different apps that aggregated photos, you could actually print to Walgreens. They had a direct correlation between people who actually printed using the photo API and the amount they spend in the stores, because it actually had a lot of flow traffic coming in. And that was Walgreens was one of our poster child on how APIs can actually affect your top line and your bottom line. So lots of help along the way. So so that's a little bit of the history, for those of you that care about how that came about. But what were the key insights, right? Every industry that happens in the world, you don't have 20 things, right? What were the 2 or 3 key insights that happened? So the first one was, it is about consumption, right? And it was not us, by the way. It started with Maps, started with Twitter, a bunch of things. But our realization was, it's not about the back-end people coming up and throwing up and saying, here are the 10 APIs, and this covers the surface area of your backend, go for it. It was actually focusing on what the developer needed to make things happen, and focusing on that particular API that actually made all the difference, and really curating it so that it was consumable, right? The second big insight we had was the digital value chain. If I can draw it virtually, here's a customer that is using a mobile app that is built by a developer that accesses an API, and that API is actually built by the API team, right? And in that, the API team uses the backend to make that happen. So it was super interesting that we put the digital value chain together, and a lot of people didn't think of APIs and the API team actually being in the middle of it, right? And so that was one of our big insights. I'm sure you've seen the digital value chain in many forms used by many, many different people. And then the third one was API products, right? APIs are products. Every company in the world actually has a concept of a product, right? And so even if you're in the services business, you have a concept product. And we wanted to make sure that people didn't think of APIs as projects. Back to the showing up and throwing up. How do you actually make sure that this shows up as a product? And you think about, how do you evangelize the product? Who's a product manager for the API product? Who is the engineering team? And that stays with that, right? That concept was really, 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 really awesome. So that was the third piece that we did really well. The fourth one was the thing that I talked about with Walgreens, which was APIs having direct business impact and making it happen, right? And companies like Walgreens, AT&T, and T-Mobile, so many others that actually organize themselves around the API products to make that happen was absolutely, how do you take this concept called API products and actually do a direct correlation to business impact? And what we did along the way was spent a bunch of time with Marshall, right? And Marshall, was thinking a lot about platform effects in a massive way. We started this a while ago with him, and I had a chance to meet him 2 weeks ago. By the way, this is his slides from his presentation to all of you yesterday. But this was one that I wanted to share with, obviously with his permission, about the technology use cases, right? If you did no APIs, you lost market share. This was research that was done over a 5-6 year period, right? We made a lot of data available. They went and got a lot of data from different companies. But if you had no APIs, you lost market share. If you had internal use cases only, right, you had small gains, but you did have gains, right? It did make a difference on how you worked and things like that. But the best part was when you had external use cases, right? The external use cases were, you do it for your supply chain, you do it for your demand chain with customers, but you also do it for innovation. Because quite frankly, a lot of people keep forgetting, right, that innovation does not only happen in the cathedral. Every company doesn't always know what is the best way for their products to be used. Making it available to the world, i.e. the bazaar, makes all the difference. And so that's where the 38% growth comes from, making it happen. So now, moving on, to the present day, digital transformations continue. App modernization is where it started. I talked about that earlier. Obviously, cloud is, and by the way, that continues. It's still happening. Cloud is actually taken off in a massive way. There are companies like AWS that are $60 billion, people like GCP that are $20+ billion, and Azure is doing really, really well. And then we actually believe, and this is not a skewed view, but this is how I think a lot of our customers think about it, is that data is Act 3, and it's the final. A lot of people think about it as the final. It's the last mile, right, in making it happen. Please do not think of this as Act 1 is already done or Act 2 is already done. This is about all three acts happening at the same time. So we find that really interesting. So let's go back to talking about the future of APIs. So in our mind, the future of API has got to do with security. So let's talk about that. APIs and infrastructure that deliver them APIs have officially become the #1 security exploit vector in 2021. Yes, APIs are absolutely, and I'm sure there's some sessions and things like that where APIs are responsible for managing nearly every interaction in the digital system at scale, right? So developers and engineers across open source and commercial products are having to act very differently around security features. This is not a nice to have, it has become a must have. And I think we are definitely going to expect the API products to deliver zero trust security principles in their products, right? There's no way around it. It absolutely has to happen. The second thing is intelligent APIs. And this is something we started talking about even 3.5-4 years ago, right? That we are going to shift from having single fine-grained request response type interactions with single systems, and we're going to go to APIs that actually represent multiple APIs, multiple systems, multiple data platforms, right? So that you can aggregate and enrich responses from many sources in parallel. And the intelligence part is there's no reason why you cannot have ML actually make that happen. So this is something that I think is absolutely coming. I think a bunch of the API companies are actually making that happen. It's been something that a lot of people have been thinking about. And so you're going to find that this shows up not only the way you build APIs, but it's going to show up in what the product companies actually show up with, right? The third one is adoption across all styles. For us, it was really simple, right? A decade ago or even more. 15 years ago, it was simple. We just said, hey, listen, SOAP is hard, REST is great. So it was just, we provide some mediation and move from there. There's a lot that's happened. GraphQL is out there today, right? gRPC is out there today. And so the point is that, adoption of APIs will happen through all different styles. And the goal here is to make it developer friendly, right, as you go forward. So I think we absolutely believe that that's going to happen across the board in many, many different ways. And today it's GraphQL and gRPC and REST and JSON, but over the next decade, I think there'll be some other styles that show up as well. We think, I certainly think, and funny, I was talking to somebody just this morning, as technologists, we have this tendency to believe that, we built this industry or we built this market 5, 7, 10 years ago. Guess what? It actually takes about 20 years, right? I mean, EAI, for those of you that are students, was actually formed in October of 1998, right? And, it is still going very, very strong. The patterns are still there between you take a bus architecture, hub spoke architecture, whatever you want to do, talk about all the different things about logic and mediation and everything else, right? Still going very strong. There are multiple generations of companies that have been formed. Linux has been going on for so long. So we're going to see, we are not even halfway through what is going to happen with APIs. In fact, I would actually bet that the next time or the next 2 years, this API Days comes up and Mehdi puts up a slide, the numbers will be at least double, if not triple, right? I think we're going to continue to make that happen. And the reason that will happen is because of the exponential growth across the board, right? Whether it is APIs on, really mini APIs on IoT devices, it is on monolithical services, whatever else it might be, but APIs are going to just grow like super crazy. So I want to take a little. This something went. Just 1 second. I want to take a little detour and talk about data. The reason there's an arrow that says data going to real-time data is because I think data is a very big space, and a lot of people think about data. We think about the data in two parts. One is data actually that is at the deep lane, where data is actually made available to an analyst. And then the fast lane, what we affectionately call the real-time data side. So I'm going to give you some observations on the real-time data part and how it actually applies, and you'll see me bring it together for data and APIs moving forward. So the first thing is companies are creating a virtuous cycle for themselves by fueling real-time apps with real-time data, right? This is something I'm sure all of you see, right? And what matters here is customers care, we all care about real-time interactions, right? We don't want to wait. I mean, we don't have the patience to wait for 2 minutes for a response, right? If you do a loan application, we wait 30 seconds and we want a response right away. That's all real-time. And I don't mean real-time nanoseconds. I mean like real-time in the human sense, not in the system sense, right? Obviously, there's a system sense of it as well. But the leaders, right, are focusing on this virtual cycle. Right? They win with all of the data. They create apps that have intelligence. They have fast actions that are fueled by ML and AI. And all of that comes from more and more data that is being collected, making that happen. We see this across the board, right? I get a chance to spend a lot of time with developers and CIOs and making that happen. So what are the key insights we see, much like we did? And by the way, this is work in progress. It's not a decade in the works, like the API insights are. But what are the key insights we see today? We see there are many, many uses of data, right? There are no limits on how you use and reuse them. And so it is just amazing how data is absolutely exploding, right, and making it happen. Data does not care if it is in motion or if it's at rest, right? Developers really just want access to data to make sure they have smart, intelligent, real-time apps. Right, that's what they care about. They actually don't care whether it's in a database, whether it's in a stream, whether it's in ABC or XYZ. Right, they just want access to data. And as technologists, we have to worry about the patterns, because whether is it key value store, is it relational database, is it a pub sub kind of a thing? We have to think about that, but finding a way to abstract that is becoming increasingly important. And something that a lot of people are focusing on. The third one is data availability. We talk about, for those of you who are just in the API world, API availability is a big deal, right? Data needs to be available to people and to systems, right? Because we are getting to a point where systems are going to start making decisions. They already, we are going with this concept of we are going from a knowledge worker to a creative worker, because a bunch of stuff that the knowledge worker did with system is actually happening, right? Is actually happening by systems themselves. So data really needs to be available to people and systems in a very easy way. And the last thing, when we're spending a bunch of time with folks like Marshall, some folks from Harvard Business School, on how data is an asset on a balance sheet. Large companies like Verizon actually think about, they actually take the data they have in the consumer division and give a value to it, right? And I think over a period of time, in a very short, it's not like years, maybe a couple of years, you will see that data shows up as an asset on a balance sheet moving forward. And I think that'll be a massive, massive win. So lots of discussion about the history of APIs, the key insights on API, how it evolved. We talked a little bit about the insights on the data side. But what is the future of APIs and data, right? Number one, I don't want anybody to forget that APIs are products, right? If there was one key thing that you would take away, it's not the digital value chain, It is obviously the consumability. It is obviously the network effects, all of that. But if you start thinking about APIs as products, you will be way ahead. And you should hold that to be true for everything you do. The second one is data is an asset, right? It is an asset that needs to be consumable by people and systems. And keep thinking about it as an asset rather than a technology thing, right? And it's not that different from abstracting the technical thing called an API into thinking about it as a product. We think about data as an asset moving forward, right? And so the asset needs to be governed. It needs to be accessible by people, by systems. You need to build ML systems on top of it and everything else, around it. Exponential growth is going to happen in both. It is absolutely a big part of everything. Data is exploding. We talked about APIs are exploding. And let's never, ever forget that data by itself, the way it becomes productized is through APIs. So a lot of you who are API geeks, right? We used to call them Api geeks a while ago. I'm sure they're called that now as well. Are actually going to become data geeks over a period of time as well, because what you are actually productizing is the data, right? And that is how the world is going to view this moving forward. And my last slide, my all-time favorite sticker at Apigee was the I love API sticker. And I thought I would, put a version of it up and say I still love APIs. Apigee and APIs will always be close to my heart, and I will always be a big part of the API industry moving forward. Again, thank you very much for the opportunity. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, Chet, again, we consumed all our time, but again, you can see in the chat, some people say we could hear you all day long. It's so inspiring, and thank you for showing us how things have been in the past to prepare about the future. I will just mention in Apidays conferences in 2015, we stopped use API integration and replaced it by API consumption, right? And to really show it's a product now. So integration is making things work. No, it's consumption, adding value capabilities. And again, and we really want to thank you, because you have been the entrepreneur putting it on the market, So yeah, thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Bedi. Thanks everybody. I hope you have a great rest of the conference. Take care.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chet. And again, it was great to have the entrepreneurial side of things. But now we will have also, let's say, another type of visionary on the investor side, on the venture capital side, with Tiffany Luck. If you can be on stage. Hello, Tiffany. How are you?
Hi, Mehdi. Good. How are you?
Good to see you. You are at SaaStr also in the same time, right?
I just finished up at SaaStr yesterday, so I'm still in Barcelona.
Yeah, time zone hacking, right?
Exactly.
So you can be in two conferences in the same time. I invite you to share your slide, and if we have time, we'll love to have some questions about the future of APIs.
Okay, perfect. Well, it's great to follow Chet, because I loved his last slide, which was I love APIs. I too love APIs, and I'm very happy that the theme of this conference is the future of APIs, because I do think there's such a bright future here, and we're really still early days. Obviously, a lot's happened, and that history was really helpful, but I think the best is yet to come. So maybe I thought today I would give you guys just a little bit of perspective of from an investor's hat, and just kind of what we're seeing and how we think about API first and API economy. So let's see. Perfect. Maybe just as a quick background and a quick hello. As Mehdi mentioned, I'm Tiffany Luck, and I am an enterprise software investor at GGV Capital. I spend most of my time focused on API first businesses. And just a bit about GGV. We are a global VC firm. We've been around since 2000. We manage over 9 billion of capital and invest all around the world at all stages. So everything seed to growth, across technology. And again, a special focus for me on API first. So excited to be here today. A couple things I thought I would walk us through, in general, kind of what's the high level excitement around APIs. I'm sure that is a topic near and dear to everyone's hearts, but I'm sure you guys feel that as well. Where to focus as you're building an API first company, and really kind of almost from the opposite side, like what do we look for? We're looking at API first businesses. What are the key components that we see in terms of building a successful, 20, 30, 40, $50 billion API first company? To follow that, we'll talk a little bit about some metrics, some more on the quantitative side of things. And then I will also just mention at GGV, we launched an API first index in March of this year. So I'll walk you through some of the things that we've seen there and just give you a heads up on where we're heading with that. Okay, so to start, why we're excited about APIs. I think just as a high level, big headline is that we do believe that the world is going to continue moving to cloud components, and think about software development in terms of components. And APIs already are, but, I think even more so, and this is my point around, future, we're here today, but I think that we're still in the early days of this. I think APIs will increasingly become a developer's best friend. We've already seen that the number of API first companies is increasing drastically. I've seen APIs for a lot of different things, both small and large. And I think even starting out where companies start out with a wedge, start out with one product. I'll talk a little bit about this, and then of course add on to that, think about a platform approach and multiple products, and really become a critical component for companies as they're thinking about adding functionality into their software or into their platforms. There's also a thriving API economy. I won't spend a ton of time talking about that today, but outside of just API first, I think there is a whole host of companies also contributing to the API economy. It's a global opportunity, right? We're seeing API first companies created everywhere, and actually serving companies everywhere as well. And not just serving companies everywhere, but also serving companies across industry. And I think that's really important. So of course, we're seeing a lot of adoption in the technology industry, but I think we're also seeing adoption, pretty much in every industry. And again, as the entire world is moving toward, is thinking through digital transformation and, figuring out how to develop software more efficiently and faster. And, I think also, the end customers are becoming more, really want like a polished product, and every industry is adopting APIs. To that point, why, this is not new, but faster time to market, efficient development. I would also add that end customer expectation around, a really beautiful interface, great functionality, fast performance. And then from an investor perspective and from a company building perspective, of course, API first companies do have very attractive unit economics, and there's a lot of good scale, efficient growth. And so it's, obviously there's the opportunity to build a very efficient, but and very large company when you're thinking about focusing on APIs. Okay, so where to focus, as you're thinking about building an API first company or thinking about scaling your API first company, what have we seen be some of the key areas that really lead to a successful, and kind of scaling and large opportunity? Certainly, this is by no means a comprehensive list, but I think it really does touch on a lot of the things that we're seeing. So I think developer experience, and I would say that's probably number one, at least in terms of starting out, right? Like you really do need to win the hearts and minds of developers. You need to, and a lot of things go into that, right? Of course, your APIs need to be reliable and high performance, and all of those good things. But I think also it's how does a developer first experience the API? Are they able to test quickly? Are they self-serving? What's the documentation like? A lot of key ingredients go into that developer experience. And ultimately making it something that developers want to share with the others. And actually have that, kind of good referral, I would say, which leads to my point around community. And, I think there's a really big opportunity to create great community amongst developers. And I would even say, if your main persona is not the developer and your main persona, possibly is the product manager or, another persona, I think there's great opportunity to create a community around those personas. And again, kind of contribute to that viral growth and, good word of mouth referrals. Platform strategy. So mentioned this just a bit earlier, and I think this is certainly not just specific to APIs, but we've seen if you look at, I'll share some examples later, but if you've looked at some of the successful API companies, start out with one product, one functionality that you're solving for with your API, and then oftentimes you're adding multiple APIs on top of that. Again, kind of extending functionality and, building kind of across and up and really, having the opportunity to become a platform where, a large platform where people can come, or developers or product managers can come and actually, get all sorts of functionality for the software they're developing. The other thing is, of course, so part of that is extending on the product side. I'd say the other big area of investment is actually building and thinking about scaling on the go-to-market side. And so even if you're starting with one particular motion, with one particular persona, I think one natural place I see a lot of people start is inbound and, mostly from developers. Or even inbound from product managers. And so, of course, figuring out how to make sure you really nail that motion. And again, kind of, I think all the things we just talked about before really go into that. But then as you're growing and as you're seeing your ARR scale, as you're seeing usage scale, figuring out what is the next move and what else do we need to add into go to market to help us reach that next level. Right. When do we need to add an outbound motion? Should we move toward enterprise? And some of those questions, thinking through when are the right time to do all of those. To that, I think I've got a few examples here. Just wanted to share some examples of public companies and how they think through this. So this is actually a slide from Twilio's last investor day. And you can see obviously Twilio has really moved, has become quite broad across everything that they're offering now, and moved from, let's just say, communications and SMS to now really thinking of themselves and positioning themselves as a customer engagement platform. Some of this they've done organically and actually built internally, and then and other pieces, of course, they've brought in through acquisition. And Twilio's is now a $20 billion company. But I think it just shows the kind of breadth and depth of actual product strategy and really how to go from one product to platform, I think is a good example of that. Another one I like to think about from a go-to-market perspective is Okta and Auth0. So this is actually a slide from Okta's presentation when they acquired Auth0, which was an exciting acquisition. And you'll see here, like, I think this is probably one of the most flexible go-to-market models I've seen. It really does cover a bunch of different personas, a lot of different go-to-market motions, and really the whole spectrum of customers. And of course, this isn't going to happen overnight, but I do think, like, as you're thinking through expanding go-to-market, these are three good, three good axes to think through, and really figuring out, like, how will you expand from, or does it make sense even to expand from one persona to the next? And if so, like, what types of go-to-market motions will support that? And again, I think especially on the customer front, one thing that's just helpful to think through here, and you'll see it in your metrics, and we'll talk through metrics in a moment, but does it, as you go up market, or even as you look at metrics across your different customer segments, what is churn like? What is sales efficiency like, right? And you just want to make sure. I think there's really no right or wrong answer here, but just making sure that for whatever customer segment you're serving, you're able to acquire those customers effectively, service them effectively, and hopefully they'll grow over time and contribute to expanding net dollar retention as your business scales. So anyway, loved this example for how Okta plus Auth0 talk about it. Okay, so on that point around metrics, again, disclaimer, since I have my investor hat on here, certainly not a comprehensive list of metrics, but I'd say these are really key ones and key buckets of metrics that people will look at. ARR and growth. So top line, right? How is the product growing? What does growth look like? What does it look like today? Kind of where is that from where it was last quarter, last couple quarters, last year? And more so as an investor, we're really betting on the future. And so what does forward growth look like? And just talking through how you're actually going to how you've set yourself up for success on that front, right? Whether it's through product strategy, go to market, a combination of the two. Again, developer experience, kind of all of those things we talked about that actually lead into this, into strong ARR growth. And I think always has been the case, but I'd say even a little bit more so in today's environment, really wanting to paint a picture around everything you're doing to support that growth, right? And, actually storytelling around the sustainability of it and the efficiency of that growth. And so one area that I think is very important is retention. And I think both on the net and the growth side. So certainly you want to see, and API businesses in general have really strong potential to show high net dollar retention. I think this is one of the huge bonuses of API companies. You actually get to grow alongside your customers. And let's say a startup starts using you, and then all of a sudden, you've got several startups using you, and they're growing really quickly. Actually benefit from that growth as well. So certainly, you want to see strong net dollar retention. At the same time, I think it's really important to at least look at gross retention. How gross, both dollar and logo. And, of course, again, depending on which segment of customers you're serving, retention numbers may vary. But I think a kind of equally important that goes into this gross retention number is for those customers that are churning, why are they churning? What is your, I don't know if you track NPS or churn reasons, and really thinking through kind of the buckets of those churn. Of course, you're going to have some customers go out of business, nothing you can do about those, about that churn, but for ones that are leaving, is it targeted the wrong customer? Is it something around documentation, around ease of use, around scalability, right? And just, I think using that to inform how you're spending resources internally and also how you're thinking about go to market. Then more on the efficiency side. So gross margin, again, kind of both where you are, where you've come from historically, and I think most importantly, where you're heading from a gross margin perspective. I see a lot of gross margin expansion stories, and I've actually seen a lot of companies expand gross margin. I think you'll just, it's always helpful to hear what are the levers for gross margin expansion? Where do you expect to be in steady state and over the long run? And where are you today and how do those two numbers line up? Also from a sales efficiency standpoint, this will look a little bit different depending on what your go-to-market motion primarily is. But, just here I want to show how are you thinking about efficiently acquiring customers, having those customers grow with you and, making sure that they're ideally expanding over time. Team size. So of course there's the quantitative piece of this, which is just, number of people in the team by department, where that number is today, where you're expecting that number to go. I also think the super important one here is also qualitative, and what key hires do you still need to make, and what are you really looking for in terms of transforming your team. And then lastly, cash balance, burn ratio. So again, to the efficiency point, how much are you spending in order to grow? What's that ratio? And not only where are you now, but how do you see that progressing over time? So these are just some of the metrics. I'd say, like, of course, this is the quantitative side, and the slide before, we talked a little about the qualitative side. Really, all of that comes together in terms of you telling the story around what is, why should we get excited about your API business? And I think, again, there are a lot of reasons to be excited right now. And I think the question is just, putting both the qualitative and the quantitative pieces together to help relay that excitement. Okay. Quickly, also wanted to share with you all the GGB API Index. So this is something that you guys can find at APIfirstindex.com. Behind the index, we're actually tracking now probably north of, probably closer to 250 or 300 private companies that are building API first. The index itself right now highlights just the top 50 private companies. We started out doing it based on total dollars raised because it's a publicly available number. And right now what's published is as of Q1 2022, and we have plans to update it quarterly. And ideally over time, our big plan here is to actually help provide more data, of course, than just dollars raised, but, to help benchmark and provide more data around what does best in class look like for an API first business against some of those metrics that I just shared before. And, help provide some guideposts at different scales. So that's something to look forward to. We will also be updating this at the end of Q2. So very soon. Just some insights, again, kind of to just talk about, put some numbers to the excitement around API first. And of course, it's not just us that's excited about API first. It's the category in general. I'd say investors across the board are super excited about it. And actually, one thing I should mention, why did we even create the API first index? You've got, you have a few great public company examples, right? So you have Twilio, and then you have some public companies that have actually acquired API first, like Okta with Auth0. But there's not a ton of, I think a lot of what's exciting in the API first world is actually happening still in the private market, and a lot of private companies that have not yet gone public. So we just wanted to bring some visibility to that set of companies, and really highlight all the activity here. So for the 50 companies I mentioned that you can find at APIfirstindex.com, that set of 50 companies as of March 2022 had raised 12 billion in total. So 50 companies, 12 billion in total. And 5 of that 12 was actually raised last year. So 2021, big year for API first. Of course, we see API first across the board, across sectors, across functionality, but certainly a lot in the fintech space. So 40% of the 50 in Q1 were fintech related, powering fintech infrastructure or powering the next wave of fintech. And here's just a quick snapshot, not all 50, just the first several. But again, you can find the whole list at APIfirstindex.com. And, do expect this. There's been some funding announcements that happened post this publishing. So do expect things to change just a bit and shift just a bit once we publish the Q2. So with that is what I had for kind of an overview, a little bit of thinking through how an investor is thinking about API first, API economy. Happy to answer any questions if anyone has any, or Mehdi, if there's something else you want me to chat through.
Yeah, no, there's actually a question. Why so many companies of the index are Silicon Valley based? And I understand also that question by is the API mindset or the API first, again, let's say a software mindset that has started in the Silicon Valley? What's there? It's the VC who understand, it's the entrepreneur. Why again Silicon Valley for APIs?
Yeah, well, I actually think APIs are very global. So thank you for that question. Yes, we've seen, of course, some of the largest API companies right now are still Silicon Valley based, or maybe Silicon Valley headquartered, now distributed. All right,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are distributed. But honestly, we're seeing API first companies everywhere, and we've actually invested in several out of Europe. So a company called Mindy, we led their Series A. They do document processing API, headquartered in Paris, and also just opened an office in San Francisco. Stream, which is a chat API, dual headquartered in both Amsterdam and Boulder, Colorado. I've met many other amazing API companies in Europe recently, and even Southeast Asia, really Latin America, truly everywhere. So, I think that the API first opportunity is global, both from where companies are being created, and then obviously both those customers that are consuming those APIs. And my guess is, it might take a little bit of time to get to that, kind of 1 billion plus mark. But I think we will absolutely see a very diverse mix from a geography standpoint in terms of API first companies.
So let's say the seed has been in Silicon Valley with the Stripe, the Twilios, the Algolia, and others, but at the end now it's spreading all over the world. That's great. So also, do you see, like, do you make a comparison with SaaS business models, or do you think it's overperforming versus overperforming SaaS when it works? Like, how the entrepreneur can relate to this SaaS versus API comparison?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the one really exciting thing about API first businesses, can be true for SaaS depending on the delivery model. But one amazing thing about API first, which I mentioned, is just the ability to grow alongside your customers, right? And actually grow even across customers. So again, win the hearts and minds of developers, and developers will implement you everywhere. And all of a sudden, one customer that started off super small, may end up growing to be one of your largest customers. And because things are happening so quickly these days, like, I don't even think that has to take a long time. So I think that the efficiency of the API model is really unique. And obviously a huge benefit just in terms of unit economics and efficiency at scale. That being said, and actually I'd say the one other thing is just the kind of the value prop of APIs, right? And I think that they're becoming more and more like, it makes a lot of sense for certain functionality, right? That is, either maybe cost prohibitive to build internally, might take too long, right? With an API, you get it fast, you get it cost efficient, and someone else maintains, the infrastructure, is constantly developing it. And so something that may be important to your product, but isn't core functionality, you kind of let someone else manage. Anyway, so I think there's a lot of, the value prop is real. The usage is accelerating. You're growing alongside your customers. It's super efficient. And I think we're still at the early days of it all. So I think there's a lot of excitement, from here on out for API first.
Yeah, and really quickly, let's say in the past Apidays conferences, someone say that the fact that your business model is API driven, API first, you're linked to what people program with your APIs, right? Integrate, consume your APIs. He used the term programmable business models, like to really say that, look, it's a business model that actually encoded, embedded into other people's software, and you grow with the whole community. Like, would you? What's your comment of this idea of programmable business models? Does that resonates or not?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good point, actually, that I should have mentioned, this idea that you are embedded, right? And, I think like embedded to me equals sticky. And so that's why I think you grow alongside, you have very, very high retention if the product is scalable and, high performance, reliable, et cetera. And I think that's a big bonus. Most of the time, people are not going to say, oh, I have a really wonderful functionality, let me rip out what I'm already using and build it myself. I would say similar to hosting, right? And so I think that's a huge advantage. And I think I would be very excited for everyone building API first. And as an investor, I'm super excited to see more API first businesses. So I guess on that note, if you are building API first, I'd love to chat with you. And I can quickly just put my email in the comments.
Yeah. So again, if you're an entrepreneur thinking APIs are the best way to build product, distribute product, embracing developers to community to add value and create value with what you've built and be connected and embedded with them. Yes, Tiffany has accepted to be there. And so, yeah, don't hesitate to reach her. She's one of the more and more VCs actually embracing it, but at least GGV and Tiffany are the one who really understand that. Thank you very much, Tiffany. It was great to have you. Thank you for taking the time and shifting from conferences. It was great to have you.
Well, thanks for creating this conference. I love it. And thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And I wish I had Chet's slide. I love APIs too. It's a great slide to end on.
Our next US conference will invite you in person. So thank you very much, Tiffany. And now we're running a few minutes late, but we had two great speakers. We will not reduce the time for the third speaker. Now, I'm really glad to have Raven on stage with us. Hello, Raven. How are you doing?
Good morning. How are you?
Good.
Good afternoon, actually.
Yeah. Good morning, afternoon on the East Coast, for sure. Just what I wanted to say, we had two great speakers, entrepreneur side, investor side, talking about value, APIs, whatever. But there's a value that is different, that is for all, that is knowledge and education, right? And this is why we wanted to have you there to tell you a little bit about what you're doing at the Smithsonian Institute about culture, specifically Afro-American culture. Yes, so the stage is yours for 25 minutes. There will be some questions for you. Let's talk about reinventing storytelling with APIs. Thank you, Raven.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mehdi. And I also want to thank Isa, Ivan, and your API Days team, because you guys have made this very pleasant experience. And Chet and Tiffany, thank you for leading this conversation, because Chet's talk about the next 10 years and Tiffany's talk about the investment and the future of APIs really fits in with what my job and what we're doing at the Smithsonian. And just to preface, as a side, I'm speaking for myself as a representative of the National Museum of African American History and Culture, which is a unit under the Smithsonian. But the Smithsonian Institution as a whole has a centralized office. I am not speaking for them and what they're doing in the future. So I just want to make sure we lay the ground for that. So I want to talk about our journey. So this conversation, Mehdi is right. It's about education at the heart of it, but it's really about storytelling, because cultural institutions and museums, exhibits, they exist to tell stories, to educate. And the future of APIs from the perspective of a private and public sector organization that serve a broad spectrum of customers and citizens also applies to us. So the conversation we're going to have today that I'm going to share about is about the Smithsonian, give a little bit of a plug and infomercial, talk about the landscape where we're finding ourselves at this point in reference to APIs, telling you how we're making a way to be able to get to our goal of becoming API first, and the pioneers, the applications that have made it so that we have these stepping stones to get to the goal that we are trying to do. I will talk about the next steps and the things I'm going to be doing in the future to help promote this within my unit. And then if there's time, I'll take some questions. So about the Smithsonian. So the Smithsonian is the world's largest cultural research complex. And it was instituted in 1846. Last year, we celebrated our 175th birthday, and we're still celebrating it. It is made up of 21 museums, 21 libraries, the National Zoo, educational centers, research centers, all across the globe. And in 2020, Congress passed legislation to establish two new museums, the National Museum of American Latino and the Smithsonian American Women's History Museum. I represent the National Museum of African American History and Culture. It is the 19th museum. It was the newest museum. Now that we have the two that are now on paper, we're no longer the newest. And it's, according to our founder, it is a way to share the history of African Americans, history, culture, and how we contributed to the history of the United States. And who am I, and why do I have the honor of speaking to you today? I was sworn in, so I'm a government employee, a civil servant in 2017, and I am the senior application developer, architect, and the DevOps engineer for the museum. And my principal as an application developer, I serve as a technical consultant and the primary implementer for this very small or smaller in-gallery interactives, that those things that you play with when you go into the museum. And they're part of the larger exhibitions. If they're larger, I'm not actually doing the larger interactives. I spend a sizable amount of my time. I have a lot of hats, but a lot of my time is thinking and playing, and I have the best job ever. But what I do is I research ways to repurpose emerging technologies so to enhance the visitor experience. So I look at things like blockchain or VR, AR, ML, all of those acronyms. I look at them and I see, hey, how can we use them first in the museum to be able to promote our mission of education and of storytelling. And then I will make a prototype, show it to my leadership, and they do with it what they please. But I'm okay if they don't use it. It's that I get to learn the technology. This particular journey about becoming API first, it started when the museum reached its 5th birthday, which was last year. And so let me set the landscape for you. There's this German philosophy, it's actually one of my favorite words, really, which expresses the spirit of agency and defining moments in history. The term is Zeitgeist, and that means spirit of the age, sort of. No one can deny that the pandemic was a moment. It was such a moment. And I don't know any area of life that was not impacted by this phenomenon. I don't know of anyone or organization or industry that was not transformed by it either. Every level of our global community had to adapt and adjust not only ways of working, interacting, engaging, but also our ways of thinking and perceiving. So, the Smithsonian, our founding director, Lonnie Bunch, fostered a digital-first way of thinking, and it's an organic part of our museum's culture. It's also the way we work. When he became secretary of the institution, he and the other undersecretaries updated the organization's strategic plan. I think they did that in 2019. And they made it future focused with the emphasis on innovation, impact, and reach. So in 2021, while we were celebrating our 5th birthday and adapting our storytelling and community programs in light of the pandemic, the Smithsonian was celebrating its 175th birthday, and the institution's leadership was rethinking how to facilitate public access to the millions of objects we have in our collection. There are actually 7 strategic goals, and these are the goals, but the ones that I've highlighted are the ones that are the priorities that impact my daily life and what I have to do for my unit, as well as my colleagues that are in the other units that do what I do or similar to what I do. The first one, goal 1, is a priority, B1 Smithsonian, because as an institution with quasi-autonomous units with a centralized governance, the need to present a united front, adopting shared values and speaking with one voice is critical. And so goal 1 is expressed as B1 Smithsonian. This means that that there should be greater collaboration among the units. And when I say units, I mean museums, the zoo, the research centers, and the galleries that we're called units. And the desire to wrangle our disparate collections and make it so that they're accessible to the global community, whether they're exploring the exhibits while in DC and in the galleries or the museum or via the internet. Goal 3 is the most impactful for me, because one, it's on my performance evaluation, and two, it's something that I think about all the time. And it is the goal of reaching 1 billion people. Yes, the secretary said we can achieve this by developing emerging digital technologies for museums, so making the museum in a way where like interactives have this platform, but also creating new digital platforms to not only serve our researchers and the staff that work within these units, but also to use and repurpose for our visitors. So making a way is part of the landscape. So we've set that landscape and we shared the start of the journey. So what I want to do is share the part of the journey where idealism and reality come to a head. So the Making a Way, the Museum boasts a permanent exhibition, which is part of our community story. It is making a way out of no way. It's entitled that, and the exhibit explores themes of agency, creativity, and resilience through personal stories of African Americans who have challenged racial oppression and discrimination, and created ways out of no way. This pretty much summarizes where I found myself when I thought, I bet an API can solve the problems that I'm trying to solve. So I rolled up my sleeves like Rosie the Riveter, and I assessed the need and the current state of things within my museum and within the Smithsonian overall, because again, we're trying to be one Smithsonian. So when I am thinking about what I can do to enhance the visitor experience for my museum, I'm also thinking about how this could extend to the other units, whether or not they are a museum, a gallery, or the zoo or research center. So it has to be extensible to incorporate them all. So the business problem that I identified for us is from a ground level perspective, is the design and the implementation of a way to surface our collection objects, to tell the story and educate the public via innovative digital product accessible in the gallery, via the interactives, and via our website. And these were the requirements. There has to be whatever this thing, the API is that delivers the information that can be used by something else. It's got to be accessible. That's like the number one, because we are accessibility first. And it's got to be able to surface the collection in a way to make it available to the public. So we need to do that. From a programmatic perspective, I have to be able to code it once, maybe twice, but no more than that, and so that it works. And as I've been listening and taking notes about how APIs get jammed up, because once you make it, it's kind of rigid because it's locked in with the way that you've made it originally, so that you don't mess up the person or the organization that's using it. I'm keeping that in mind, and I'm trying to think of innovative ways to make this API that I want to design as extensible and as plastic as possible. It also has to be secure, adaptable, flexible, and I have adaptable twice, but I didn't mean that. Extensible is really what it's supposed to be. It's my acronym for SAFE. That is what the API I'm thinking about making it needs to be. It also, when I use it and I create interfaces for the content owners or curators or historians, when I create that part of the interface, it's got to be able to serve the technology diverse stakeholders. Some people who are great with technology and some people who would rather not. It also has to, whatever it is, that the API has to be able to get the data that will allow me to create a digital product that will delight the visitor, because that's actually the ultimate goal, is to enhance that visitor experience. Looking at the current state. So the current state of how data is stored and how things come to fruition in the gallery or on the website began and it's been evolving over time with the digitization efforts. So the SI Central Office created the Digitization Program Office, which oversees the efforts of not only digitizing images of the objects, but also 3D reproduction of these objects. And depending on the museum and on the gallery, the digitization of the collections is in various states. Freer Sackler, they've done their whole collections, all 200,000 of them. They're in digital format. The Design Museum, Cooper Hewitt, that's in New York, they've done a lot. They had this really big push to digitize their images, and so they've got a lot of their collection online. And then you have a museum like Natural History, which boasts millions of objects in their collections, in multiple collections, which I doubt that it will take over 100 years to be able to digitize everything that they've got in their collection. The other thing is that our collection management system is centralized, but it is a little bit old and it really needs to be updated. And the data store for exhibitions, because again, what's supposed to happen with the API, it's supposed to emulate the in-gallery experience on a digital platform. But the exhibitions, there are objects, there are images, and then there are graphics. And none of those are stored in the same data store. That's problematic. The other thing that's problematic is the way we apply accessibility. And because accessibility is one of those requirements that is up there, it's a high priority, the accessibility compliance needs to be worked out. So thinking about this and understanding where I need to go, what I need to do, we've made strides. We have actually pioneering applications that have come out because of the things that we have done. And it's been a step-by-step process to get us there. So if we return to the idea of that defining moment, the pandemic forced the issue. And for the Smithsonian, donors eased the way with their financial support. Because while we are a government organization, the museums and all of the galleries, everything runs on donor money. So they're not supported by citizen money. So we do have these galleries. So taking baby steps, the institution and individual units created digital products that demonstrate what is possible with one API. We only have one real good API in the organization. So there was the Smithsonian-wide digitization project. I spoke about that. It was a massive effort. It used volunteers from who signed up with the Smithsonian, did it online, did it remotely to help transcribe documents, as well as people in our 3D and digitization office to digitize those images. And almost, I think every unit we have a digi team, and the digi team is responsible for making sure that these assets are digitized. Then there was the Smithsonian High. The Smithsonian High was actually first conceived by the Hirshon Gallery and Sculpture Gallery. They actually thought about the High. And what it is, it's a mobile app where you go into the gallery for Hirshon, and there are QR codes where you use your mobile device and you scan the QR code, and then you'll be able to have access to the data for that particular object. And you can save it. You can use it for your own. And I believe that you can use it in a creative way with the Creative Commons. Don't quote me on that. I have to actually look that up before I shouldn't have said that. The next thing that happened was the SI Open Access Project, which, hallelujah, I am so glad that happened, because what that did is it took that one API I was telling you about, it took it from the state that it was in, which caused me great frustration, and it made it a little bit better. So now that the collections for the Smithsonian, things that are not licensed, things that are not sensitive, things that don't have these constraints around how we can use them, it took those objects from the collection system, and then it went to and made it possible for the public to use it. So it does have a Creative Commons license, so the public can peruse the collection and use them any way they want. And so the open access project allows you to just create a way. And if you do a really creative, innovative project with it, we ask that you allow us to showcase it on our museum. And from there, the units started using open access. And so my museum, we have our own open access project, which means that we take the open access capabilities that was offered by the Smithsonian, and we filter it so that it only has our collection objects. And so we've have now this open access. So you can see how these steps happen, like digitizing, and then a unit using the digital assets to be able to create a product, and then having that need and that goal, push it so that Smithsonian recognize, let's go ahead and make our collections, or try to figure out a way to make our collections open. And then the units being able to use that and make that open. And one of the most recent things that my unit has come up with using open access is creating this searchable museum. The searchable museum is this wonderful application that allows you to peruse the collections, but in a guided way. I think I have it open on yes, here it goes. So I'm going there. I don't think there's music. Hopefully I don't remember if there's music. So if I refresh it, this is searchablemuseum.com. And what it does is when you go to the site, you get this wonderful splash screen. And once it stops, you are able to scroll down. And I have to plug that Bloomberg Philanthropies were the ones that funded this project. Our first exhibit that's in this searchable museum is Slavery and Freedom. If you were in the museum, it would be the bottom 3 floors. They're actually underground, and they're called the Slavery and Freedom exhibition. And when you click and enter into the exhibition, and let me mute the audio, then you get this wonderful timeline that shows you what the way the History Museum is. And what's really cool about this is that the way it displays, it is running from, if you were physically in the museum, it's starting from the mezzanine level and it's working its way down to the bottom, where we talk about the introduction of slavery into the United States. So these were the pioneering projects that for me will help me on with my next steps. So what are my next steps and what are my to-dos? Well, I'm going to make one big ginormous API to serve them all. That's my goal. And I'm hoping to be able to use the open access API, which is not so open when you want to use it internally, because it's kind of kludgy and it doesn't have a real good way to use it over HTTP. I've got to work with them, with the organization. But I'm working on an accessibility application, which is a collaborative project with the National Center of Atmospheric Research. And it's like an application to help blind and low vision users navigate cultural institutions. And it will pull data from the collection management system. I'm also working on a prototype to revamp our interactive management platform within the museum so that we have a uniform platform to present our collection objects. And then I want to use that the collection with the API to transform the static spaces within the museum into these more educational spaces. We've got this space in the museum. It's a contemplative court. It's a beautiful space, water fountain, very low lighting. It gives you a place to relax and to just to be present after your experience, especially because it's in between the history galleries and above. So these are my next steps. And so I don't know if there's time for questions.
Thank you very much, Raven. We are just like really 20 seconds for questions. The question we have is like, so with APIs, where do you think the museum data can be embedded? Like it can be embedded up to where?
It can be embedded anywhere. That's the goal, for it to be able to be used and consumed by other developers, by other companies, but and internally. That's the whole goal. It's to make it ubiquitous.
That makes sense. This is why APIs are made, right? You know,
Yes.
this maximize distribution and self-service for people who we didn't reach, where we're not able to reach, to finally find what they were looking for and build with it, build on top of it on the shoulder of giants.
Yeah.
Thank you, Raven, for having been with us. And yes, we'll hope to continue the discussion at our next events in person and to follow the work you have been doing.
Awesome. Thank you, Mehdi. I appreciate the time to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Raven. And so we're going for our first break, a 20-minute break now. So we'll be back at 10:45 for a next talk, and again in 3 different tracks. Let's say the open API technology tracks, and standards and enterprise discussion. The technology track with security, the API security tracks, and again a 3rd track about roundtables and workshops. So I'll let you decide. You can also visit the booth at the on the virtual booth at the event. And also you will be able to participate to the treasure hunt that we organize. You will see the slide when I will finish talking. Enjoy your break. See you in 20 minutes. Thank you.